That's good. So when I first started to write this book, I was compelled by an utter fascination with the culture of these people living in this sort of primitive secrecy and working with this monster power. And when I stepped inside that world, I found another world, which was the day-to-day, the people burning the cookies, having worms in the bathtubs. And I thought, well, this is a world I sort of recognize more. And I thought about how we live in the little world and the big world at the same time. So I created another narrative with a young couple, Pauline and Clifford, and their little world, and then juxtaposed it with the big world of the atomic bomb. I was going to read originally a chapter called Calculating Women, about the movement that the women at Los Alamos, up on the hill, which is where they all lived, went through to organize and to get their needs met. But I'm doing something that not a lot of authors can do. I'll tell you why. I changed my mind. I'm reading from an edited excerpt from the climactic chapter of the book, and I can do this because you know the bomb was tested, you know the bomb was dropped on Japan, and though for the scientists who were present, they did not know what to expect, whether on the one hand it might not even work, or the other, they might obliterate the world right then on the spot. I'm choosing to read this because the irony is not lost to me that I am currently receiving radiation treatment in my spine, and this is not the first time radiation has saved me. So, just a couple things. I think everything I think it's easy to follow. There's a couple scientists in here, Robbie Wilson, a specialist brought in Bainbridge, Robert Oppenheimer, called Oppie, his brother Frank, who's also a physicist, was brought in as a security specialist for the test. Then there's General Leslie Groves, who was the Army counterpart. There was a military and a science presence at Los Alamos, and there was always this sort of battle between them, but in the end, General Groves did look out for Oppenheimer. The name of the test site and the test is Trinity, named by Oppenheimer. It's way out in the desert at the end of a part called Jornada del Muerto, one day's journey to death. So, those last 12 months, while the scientists had worked to finish the bomb, had been longer than a calendar year. Frequently, they'd fallen into crevices and found themselves in unrecorded time. Many of them would swear that in that year they'd become, at their core, old men. Recollections of just the week before were already fraught with nostalgia, and the men felt a sentimental, bittersweet longing to return to the early days in Los Alamos. But time became swifter, louder, as the date of the Trinity test neared. So beyond human experience was the explosion being engineered that no one could foresee with certainty the magnitude of power, of light, of destruction, nor estimate any of these closely enough to be sure what type of measuring devices they'd need. Should they expect a dud sputtering into stillness, or a firework display of divine dimensions? Numerous instruments had to be acquired or built to cover all the possibilities. Up on the hill, many of the Army men, including the beloved pediatricians, were receiving inoculations before being shipped off to the Pacific. Everywhere there was more war even than there was water to drink or air to breathe. International concentric circles surrounded the bomb, and at that same center raged a disagreement about whether or not to tell the Russians about the test shot in advance. Setting off a dangerous bomb in the desert was one thing, but provoking a worldwide arms race was quite another. Then there was the question of whether or not to actually unleash the bomb on the enemy. Some among the scientists still wanted it to serve as a threat, no more. But Oppenheimer, who had once and would later argue the pacifist point of view, had at the crucial moment declared that nothing short of an actual discharge would adequately scare away the Japanese. They aren't listening, I'm sure of that. He seemed able to see through stone, to see into the future. You're clicking on us," Wilson had hissed. Outwardly, Oppie appeared able to withstand his recent unpopularity among the men. But inside his pocket, his fingers worried the old German coin. Turned it, turned it. "This is ugliness, no doubt about it," he said softly, walking away. "But this bomb will be the last of its kind ever to be exploded." He wasn't eating, sleeping, but always had at least one cigarette going. Smoke issued from his mouth, his nose, his ears. The trademark hat appeared too heavy for his skeletal form. For months now, the mesa had been racked by trial explosions in the canyon below, where implosion lenses were being tested. Even at this late date, modifications on the gadget were being made, and meanwhile, the base camp was being prepared like a stage set before a theater performance. Groves wondered if there had ever come a time when all doubts were resolved, all specifications finalized, and why was it taking them so long? Oppenheimer read the general's mind. "We know so much more," he explained, "than we knew when we started." Outside the wires of the tech area, a small gathering, mostly mothers, surrounded the departing Dr. Barnett, the man who had ushered so many babies into this uncharted world. "Take care of your children," he said with a shallow smile. Beside him, his wife, Shirley, had tensed into taut graciousness and fear. As more enlistees were shipped off to sea, more men were being moved out to the base camp. In all, 700 people were attached to the test shot operation. 700 bodies sizzled rather than slept at night, chugging gulps of hard water to hydrate themselves, sharing the barracks with scorpions, tarantulas, and the sting of heat. Twice that summer, practice bombs of conventional explosives were dropped onto the site by B-29s originating from the Alamogordo Air Base. Trinity, lit and mistaken as a target, was spared only by the inaccuracy of the pilots, who struck wide, destroying the carpentry shop and the stables. "Idiots," Groves muttered when he heard, heartened that his own boys hadn't made any such significant mistakes. Almost at once, though, he realized that this was the same Air Force in charge of preparing the pilots who had let his bomb loose on Japan. No matter, the damaged structures could be rebuilt lickety-split with the same careless craft that had reduced most of the homes back on the hill. New roads were needed between here and there as dust puffed in the tire ruts and stones dinged the undercarriages of the trucks. Again, the Army had created an entire settlement out of desert dust and muscle and the same pride of empire that impelled them toward war. Each new arrival would stop and blink at the stark and seemingly uninhabitable base camp. And religious or not, they all hurried to protect themselves with prayers. Bainbridge had supervised the construction of a 100-foot tower on which the test bomb would be exploded. They had to get it right this time. This was not an experiment that could be replicated. Never could the same exact universe be recreated. The winds would change, as would the moods of the spirits. Bainbridge turned away from the tower, surveyed the hot, cranky desert, and when he turned back again, already that world had perished. Groves observed his headman dwindling. Oppenheimer's weight was way down. His posture astute. "Do you want a steak? I can get you a steak," Groves offered him, in the midst of all kinds of shortages. Thanking the general, Oppenheimer answered that he'd eaten steak just the night before. "You don't look well," Groves told him. Again, Oppenheimer thanked the general. What else could Groves do for the frail but sturdy scientist? He had been fussing over Oppie for weeks, worrying about his health, uplifting his morale, wishing him to stay well. Noticing a band of sweat along the sunburned skin below Oppie's eyes and across his nose, the general fought an impulse to take his hanky from his pocket and swab the gaunt face dry. Instead, he asked, "How's the baby?" "Doing fine. I don't see her much, though. And Kitty? Kitty's doing well." Those blue eyes that had once impressed the general seemed faded or sad. Groves patted his man's back and could feel the rib bones through his shirt. Just that much force unbalanced Oppie and sent him forward one tipsy step.